Chapter 2. Kingston, Jamaica, 1956. Thou shalt not kill other Jews. Fourth commandment. Christian Bible. Jesuit understanding of it. My parents were diplomats from a NATO country, the Netherlands. I could do maths, but excelled at language and sport, as by the time I was 16 I could run a 5-minute mile on sand, barefoot, clean 20 kilos more than my body weight. 20 chin-ups straight was a warm-up. Had stopped boxing and ninjutsu as I had completed my second dan, and was tossed into the open-handed slap shop of the Shaolin school. I rode just for conditioning. Looking back, it was a great life, and in all reality, I never knew it. Being tropical, school started early and finished early. First class by 0600, home by 1300. So by the time I'd gone to the rowing sheds, or the dojo, or the boxing gym, and either punched, run, lifted, or rode, I could be home and have my homework and study done by 1700, leaving me 2 hours of daylight before I had to be home again for the evening meal and whatever Mum and Dad had planned. Most nights, until I was about 14, we'd actually do the Moscow puzzle book, or Dad would toss around quadratic equations for me to solve. Yep, if you could not do polynomials. Yep, if you could not do polynomials as mental maths, you'd be considered retarded and put up for adoption. Apparently, I had 4 older siblings who left home this way before I had a chance to meet them. But I never could tell if Mum and Dad were serious on this point. When it wasn't the maths games, we'd play the language round robin. This one started when I was about 9 years old. Both Mum and Dad had forgotten to check my enrolment papers in January, each thinking the other had done so, when neither had. By the time November had come around, they were discussing in English what they should get me for Christmas. Little did they know I'd been listening into their parents-only chats with reasonable comprehension since late July. When they were chatting in front of me about a Christmas gift, Dad all gooey about his little girl, I looked directly at him and said in English, I'd rather a spinnaker for the catamaran, or at least a decent spray jacket, and a sleeping bag so I can sail over to Montego Bay. At which he replied, I was too light for a spinnaker, I'd increase the chance of capsize by 18.6%. Bloody engineer, thinks me. They seem to have their sense of adventure and humour surgically extracted once they've done calculus. He continues, and there was no way I was sleeping on the beaches unaccompanied at Montego. There was no way I was sleeping on the beaches unaccompanied at Montego. It would be entirely unacceptable conduct for a young lady, let alone not safe. All in English. At which time he stopped, noticing that Mum was tapping gently on his knee in Morse. ... dash. Dash 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 dot. Dash dash dot. Stop! His face changed while the drift of realisation filtered into his eyes. Both Mum and Dad now had that mute poker face expression, which meant they were attempting to estimate how long I had been listening in to their parents-only conversations, and what I might have manipulated out of them, or worse yet, and quite rightly so, what work conversations I had been privy to. Then Mum says to me in English, Dad's right, you'd need a different class of life jacket for those longer runs. Then in Spanish states clearly to Dad, it's your fault. You've always wanted a boy, and this is what you'll get. She'll be a dyke feminist by the time she's 15, and likely die a virgin. My mother would be ashamed of her. Dad snaps back. My Indonesian mother wouldn't give a shit. She'd love her because that's what real parents do. So I just sat there comprehending everything and not letting on that I had a clue what Mum was saying, although what the hell a Dutch canal Femi something and the Virgin Mary had to do with Grandma, I had no idea. See, all the house staff, including Nanny, spoke Creole, French and Spanish. So although the international school was taught in Dutch and in the playground we'd speak either French or Creole, or knuckles depending on what boy was dumb enough to pick on a girl. I was a kid, and if it wasn't a scratched knee or a black eye, I'd have a cut knuckle every week. In the garden, however, and in the kitchen when Mum and Dad weren't around, which was half the time, Nanny and I would prattle away in Spanish like a pair of senoritas from Madrid, and no one ever thought anything of it, except when she slapped me for using bad words. Purely by chance, these conversations never took place in front of Mum and Dad. Either way, the language game was played as a round robin. Dad would start in Dutch, Mum would answer in French, I would reply in Dutch, and then Dad would have to speak next in French, and so on. Any slip from either the pattern or into a third language, which would typically be me, because I'd want to move to my generic Creole of my playground, punishment for the slip was to do all the dishes by myself. The reward was 1 guilder in the piggy bank, and the first error ended the game. My parents over the years kept stretching my vocabulary so that by the age of 12 I could code shift and think in the spoken language effortlessly. Thus drilling recruits in Hindi would later become second nature, not a struggle. Christmas Day I woke to find the compromise. 3 self-inflating life jackets, 2 trapeze harness, 3 ultra-lightweight sleeping bags, hidden deep inside 3 compressible dry bags. To the tune of Joy to the World, the water's salt, let earth receive their navigator. To the tune of Rule Britannia, Rule Adriana, Adriana rules the waves. Most people forget the Dutch ruled the world once by sail power, and you thought the pirates of the Caribbean were uncontrollable. I was about to go nuclear with excitement. Well, trigonometric, maybe. I had visualized overnight runs to Cuba to buy Dad a surprise cigar. Such was my wild and erratic fancy. What I have thus far failed to mention is relevant now. Dad was by trade a brand new type of engineer, not so freshly minted, more crusty and spooky smart. He was a materials engineer. The Dutch diplomatic service snatched him up straight from the Sorbonne with the offer of global travel and trade negotiations. It was either that or a job with NASA, and no one really trusted the Yanks. So, in the basement of our embassy home, he had built a Tornado catamaran. Being Dad, however, he'd read the plans once, tossed them out, reduced the wood material bill by 25%, increased the epoxy weight by 3%, thus making this beast of a day sailor lighter but stronger, and then the maniac added hydrofoils. It meant we could sail faster than the wind on runs, reaches and tacks. Once the prevailing wind was 11.2 knots or greater. The addition of the trapeze kit meant that we could really increase our speed by a minimum of 15%. Key term here, minimum. That turns a 10-knot breeze literally into a speedway for us. 15-knot breeze, we're easily doing 20 knots, about the same as an aircraft carrier. Go figure. You can see the young Femi Canal something, Virgin Mary dreaming that Magellan had no ticker, heart, and I was going to sail the world alone. If I could convince Dad to let me, or if I could somehow manage to steal the boat. Well, maybe to Montego. So Boxing Day was spent ploughing furrows in the water and learning how not to get catapulted from the trapeze into the stays or the mast. When I shut my eyes, I can still feel the sting of the salt water, the deafening rush of the wind, and the heart-racing sheer exhilaration of the naked speed as we screamed across the bay, past Port Royal, and into the azure turquoise Caribbean Sea. This was more like it. Stuff maths a bit. Just let me sail. I never did get to sail to Montego, nor to Cuba, and this is why. Ever seen an enraged Dutchman turn from white to red to purple, then to scariest of all, cold grey in rage? 3 years after that first trapeze sail, when I was 12 and politely coasting through the academics at school, blitzing it in the dojo and the gym and the rowing shed, there was this one kid. He was 15 years old, was 20 kilos heavier than me, with the acne of mid-puberty, with bum fluff unshaved below his nose, and he had triceps and biceps and all the misplaced self-confidence that seems to be ubiquitously endowed with the next dose of testosterone. while seemingly it subtracts IQ points with unequal and exponential proportions. He had braces. I knew him, sort of. By now, I'd been advised if I spent any more time in the waiting room outside the principal's office that the School Works Committee was considering funding a plaque naming me as the permanent resident to go above the seat. Such was my overwhelming sense of justice that any such warnings were meaningless when it came to a yard scrap. If there was a mate or a smaller kid involved was being picked on. On reflection, in reality, I just liked punching the stuffing out of bigger kids and winning. Well, this time I was restrained, but the unintentional consequence nearly started a diplomatic incident, and it ended my days at the international school. Let's call the over-muscled, pimple-faced moron Pimpleface. He'd taken it into his head that it would be funny to brass-snap my mate, who neither invited such unwanted attention nor enjoyed it. So I told him, go away and leave her alone, Pimpleface, plus a few other words that the editor just scrubbed. He replied, well, what? I calmly said, or I'll scramble your eggs, pussface. He responded by making such a foreseeable left hook that I ducked, stepped right, slapped his right ear just to warn him off. Please reread the line where I stated that the increased testosterone had decreased his IQ. Now, it's neither fun nor sporting to make fun of the foolish, but if you wander into my life saying, hit me please, don't wonder why you end up staring at a white ceiling with the sound of a heart monitor pinging in the background. He turned and actually landed a kick to my crutch that was so well timed I thought he'd crack my pelvis. I landed on my back, eyes smarting, winded from the shock and gasping for air. Luckily, my head did not snap back and hit the ground, or I may have been concussed. He came over to kick me in the head or the ribs, and I reflexively palm struck him in the mouth. Two things happened next. My hand stung like it had been cut with razors, and he kind of screamed as he crumpled to the ground. See, the palm strike is one of the most effective and the easiest hits to get right. No chance of breaking a knuckle, little chance of breaking a wrist. All straight line power, typically started at the Achilles, but concatenated in this case as I was on my back, so it only started from my left glutei, bum cheek. So far, this seems okay. There was, however, the issue of my stinging hand. I looked at it, and it had been bleeding in neat little parallel lines with unevenly spaced cuts, also bleeding at right angles, kind of like a miniature set of railway tracks laid by drunkards. Oh, I got my breath back. Stood up, and he was out for the count. Handy for 2 slaps. He was bleeding from his mouth. Oh, turns out I'd stuck the braces to the inside of his mouth, top and bottom, for at least 8 teeth in total. And I suspect they may be ever so slightly loose. By this time, a teacher had me by the ear and was dragging me off to my regular seat outside the principal's office. No big deal. Been there, done that. What do I care? He won't do it again. Well, the problem was he was the French ambassador's only son, and when I got home that day, for the first time ever, Dad was waiting for me. I ate my next 14 meals standing because my hindquarters were so tender I could not sit. Ablutions were an aerial squat over the pan. I refused to speak to my father for a month, but during this time the truth of what I had done was slowly sinking in. I did not return to school. School had not expelled me. Mum had withdrawn me. It seems this was done in an effort to prevent France from invading the Netherlands, or at least that's what Dad claimed. Then the truth of my family came to light. Dad was indeed a cultural attaché with the trade delegation, but my mother most certainly was not. It turns out she was an electronic warfare officer who not only outranked Dad, but had her own staff and her own office. In the basement at home. That curtain that I'd never looked behind had a few rooms with tunnel exits. Talk about stunned. What were the odds that I'd been too interested in sailing and boxing never to look behind the curtain and find a locked door? Had I found it, what would have Mum said? As part of my withdrawal from school, I was now posted as a trainee signals officer, paid, on the books, part-time, and sworn to death by firing squad if I ever broke ranks or secrecy. Not unlike the Royal Navy or the British Army, I was effectively made a girl soldier, a teenage midshipman. The Royal Navy stopped this in the early 1960s. Alas, my mother had pulled enough strings to reinstitute a past practice just to secure her cover story. Who was she that she could do this?